Hello, you Awakening Wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. What a time it is to be reporting globally with absolutely no censorship or incursions upon my free speech. We know there is surveillance. We know there are attempts to control our conversation. But for now, we may speak freely, and we'll be talking about Nazis, new and old. We'll be talking about the return of globalism through Canadian politics. We'll be talking about Klaus Schwab and the truth behind the WEF. And we'll be talking about Trump's first 100 days. Let's see Mark Carney celebrating and demonstrating what a great guy he is. If you're watching this on YouTube, X, or anywhere other than Rumble and Rumble Premium, make your way there. And that's with a loving nod to the locals community, who I will forever adore. Get Rumble Premium now if you don't have it already for an ad-free experience. Now, do you know what it's like to become the leader of the free, maybe not so free world? Yes, Canada's back, baby. Cut me a bleed maple syrup. Somebody needs to freeze that man's bank account in the free state of Florida, where surely I will soon return after dealing with ceremonies and trials of my own. There is a reason to adore the Sunshine State. Only in Florida would you see a sight like this. Very efficient. Is he a professional? Is that him doing his job, or is this like a bystander? I mean, I see there's a cop car, but that's not a police uniform. Is that like a special alligator unit? Let me know in the comments and chat.
Never in my wildest dreams.
I think he let it down a little bit with the celebration. It was really professional up to then. I was thinking, my God, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu can work against the reptilians. Maybe that's the way that the ultimate confrontation will happen. The WEF and the WHO and all of the other necromancers that infiltrate with their dark claws and tendrils. Maybe we just need to wrestle them down the way that alligator was detained. Last week we showed you how back in the glory days of Britain, before it became an island penitentiary, the people there were ready to lean into herbal remedies. Not only herbal remedies, seems like most people were drunk a significant amount of the time in order to fight off, you know, the version of COVID then, the common cold. Now let's have a joyful and nostalgic look back at the way that Cockneys used to talk before we jump straight into vape testing.
And I can remember a case where I was miles up in the desert, Oregon, on the other side of the brook somewhere. And there was I'd been out there 4 years then, and there was a young lad, you know, and I heard him speaking, so I said, "Where do you come from?" So he said, "London." I said, "I know you do." I said, "But whereabouts in London?" He said, "Bethnal Green." I said, "I knew that."
I mean, Bethnal Green was with the F. I mean, you take it which way, either one F or two Fs. You can take it which way you like, you know what I mean? And that's how it was years ago.
Today, they're much more modern than I am. They say Bethnal Green.
I've got grandchildren today, I'm afraid to talk to them because they're so posh here. They, "Hello, grandfather, how are you?" So I say, "Well, hello, pal, how are you getting on, girl, all right?" And this is it today, isn't it, really?
It's everyday talk now. It isn't be sort of, you say apples and stairs and things, apples and pears and things like that. They don't use it there. It's everyday things, little catchphrases at the end of sentences and things like that. I mean, they use the word "you see" or "all right" on the end of every sentence. It's "all right" or "you see," you know, always stuck on the end of a thing. That's right, yeah. Yeah, and if they want to talk to you, you know, they say, "Hang on a minute." You know, it's all little catchphrases now. Instead of saying apples and stairs and apples and pears and all things like that, you know, it's died out now. Right. I mean, if I turn around to Ronnie, I say, "I've got hold of this, like, I get something, I say, I want to knock this out a bit sharp." You know what I mean?
That's straight away they turn around and say, "What, you had it off?"
Yeah.
I think you've had something fell off the back of the lorry.
I mean, we talk like that now. I mean, all the time we're in the pub here, like, they're coming and say, "I want to knock this out quick," like, you know, everyone wants to buy it, you know. And all things like that, I mean, we know. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say it. I mean, no, we're all straight here. We're all crooks here.
Say you take your overcoat off and you put it up on the rack in a pub and you say, "Look after my smother for me, Fred." Well, it's your overcoat, you know what I mean? And you might have your twirls in your pocket. What's that? Bunch of keys. And amongst the screwsmen, they go out and say, "Where's me Glim?" Where's my glimmer? That's his torch.
You still use those?
Not so very often these days. They're all inside doing bird now, aren't they?
Everyone's in jail that used that slang. Amazing. Join us for more interrogation into slang over the course of the day. Who doesn't enjoy that intuitive poetry that comes out of the vernacular world there? A man from Armanabad unknowingly filmed the Falgam Islamist terrorist attack, unaware of the chaos unfolding around him. Let's have a look at this. What's he doing? Having a perfectly nice time on a zip wire. Woo! I mean, it's actually an incredible shot. Maybe the best journalism is inadvertent. Wherever you're watching us, YouTube or X, ultimately come join us on Rumble. We'll be talking about subterranean bases of the powerful. We'll be talking about new emergent Nazism. Where does real fascistic control reside? We'll be talking about Ukraine, and we'll be talking about Jay Bhattacharya's science is back statement. Now that Jay Bhattacharya is not an outcast but the head of the NIH, is it possible that science can be conducted openly and candidly? Before we get into that, here's a person who tests 10,000 vapes a day, baby.
So this step kind of blows my mind. Our friend here is testing each one of them. I'm not sure if it's for taste or volume or I'm not sure precisely what. I'm also curious if he is inhaling or if it's like a cigar, just quick taste test and exhale.
这些都没问题吗？你一天大概能测多少个？
一天大概要测平均7-8千吧。
7-8千，多的时候呢？
多的时候就1万多。
你自己平时抽吗？那你下班之后还抽吗？
下班之后。
Look, I don't know much about vapes, but it doesn't seem to me that that can be very good for you. And then you consider just 1/10,000th of that have some kind of negative impact. Surely, though, we have to get beyond addiction, beyond madness. Here's a quick message from one of our partners. We'll be back in a minute with some analysis of Klaus Schwab's resignation from the WF, why it happened, and what sets of powers he represents. You just saw Mark Carney dancing his way back into power. Bank of England, Bank of Canada, now Canada as a whole. Let me know in the comments and chat if you think that globalism is back. Let me know in the comments and chat if you think that Trump's 101 first days have delivered, or are we beginning to see some cracks in MAGA? Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. It's a quick word from one of our partners. I don't go anywhere without a sweet bag of this stuff, and if I have to force it into an internal body cavity, I'll do it. 1775, that's the sweet taste of revolution. The naughtiest of the beans, the darkest of the beans. But why should we be penalised for drinking coffee? We shouldn't. Why not have a coffee that could reverse time? Not like Marty McFly, going back time just to touch up his own mum. No, Marty. Hentin, jig, 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 gigawatts. Oh, man, Biff. Come on, Biff. Biff, cut me some slack, Biff. I don't think I could take that kind of rejection. What Marty McFly, what George McFly, what Biff and all of the McFlys needed was 1775. As we peel back the layers of our foreskin, news media, like a modern illusion, corporate narratives, media manipulation, foreskin, governments playing God, we come to a simple realization. Everything they sell you is designed to keep you weak. Your food, your news, your medicine, your coffee, everything. And that's because a fully awakened version of you would be a threat to the system. Become a threat to the system with Sweet Lady 1775. Revolution juice, I call it. And I'm not talking about my semen. So what happens when you start asking questions? When you say, actually, no, I won't start my day with a chemical cocktail brewed by the same boardroom that funds censorship and pharma ads, you look elsewhere. You find something different. Like 1775's Rejuvenate coffee, not made in a lab, not cooked up by an algorithm, but roasted weekly in Miami, like Don Johnson and the other lad, Crockett and Tubbs. That was it. This is from Crockett and Tubbs, the only powder out of Miami you can rely on and trust. When you get that white powder, you best be careful. You know what goes on in Miamski. This is brewed weekly in Miamski with real beans, real principles, and CA-AKG, a compound studied for its ability to support energy, recovery, and healthy aging at the cellular level. Some studies even suggest it could reverse biological age. Here it is. Look at this stuff. Delicious. Right in the throat. Delicious stuff. Making me feel better already. Just the corner of the box went in my larynx, and I feel like a 9-year-old boy. Not in a Joe Biden way, not in an Epstein Island way. I feel like I am the 9-year-old boy. Imagine aging backwards while screaming into the void. Imagine reversing down the tunnel of time with your anus completely relaxed by these naughty beans. What could be better than that? It's single origin, mold-free, toxin-free, and woke-free, made by people who actually believe in things like bodily sovereignty, free speech, and the radical idea that your coffee shouldn't come with a lecture. Go to 1775coffee.com, use the code BRAND, and get 15% off. Rejuvenate your body, resist the machines, and wake up on your terms. 1775. Get younger now, baby. Oh man, sometimes that's the only prayer that I need. Last week, we talked about how Bill Maher's visit to the White House had inspired Larry David to write an admittedly funny op-ed in the New York Times, My Dinner with Adolf, where he talked about normalizing dictators through conversing with them. But I think the period where people think that Trump is some new proto-Hitler is over, isn't it? Surely we recognize that the new dynamic now are shifting tectonic plates when it comes to polarizing global powers, and when it comes to domestic politics, it's imperialism versus globalism, which usually comes in the guise of social democracies. Where are the real Nazis now? Are they, as Joy Reid attests, still within the profiles of racial political dynamics, or is true power concealed by financial elitism, or found in the form of financial elitism? Before we get into Joy Reid's analysis, let's have a look at Bill Maher Let's have a look at Bill Maher asking Al Gore about the appropriateness of the ongoing Hitler comparisons. Let's get into
Yeah. So I think we generally have the same view of the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Al Gore, in many ways, was the last of the smug Democrats, wasn't he? He was so close to being president of the United States, a few hanging chads and a time zone in Florida away from becoming the commander-in-chief. And it had some kind of impact on Al Gore, didn't it? From then on in, climate change, he claimed he invented the internet, claimed he invented democracy, made all sorts of audacious claims, and in a way, I figure he might have been the end of an era that actually needed curtailing. Let's have a look at how he understands Nazism and the ongoing slur that Trump is like Hitler. Remember, Hitler without the Holocaust, that ain't no kind of Hitler.
Yeah.
You were in the news this week for invoking Nazis.
Well, I didn't do what J.D. Vance did and call Trump America's Hitler when he did that a few years ago. I think there's a...
Well, what he actually said was, I think about Trump a lot, and he could be an asshole just like Nixon, or he could be America's Hitler.
Oh, that's accurate,
and I remember thinking, oh, so the good option is that he's just an asshole like Nixon?
Well... But I think there's a big difference in comparing someone to Hitler on the one hand, which I don't do. I think that's a big mistake. And I said that in the speech that you're referring to. That's a unique form of evil that should not ever be compared to anything. But we are not living up to our responsibility to our Constitution if we don't remain alert to warning signs that we know from history, not only from the Third Reich, but from a whole series of strongman dictators. When they start trying to tell people what to think, when they start trying to expand their power so that they push the Congress around, push the judiciary around, and try to consolidate dictatorship, the first steps on that road are ones that we should see as warning signs.
I know. I just think that when you use the word... I couldn't agree more, but I just think You know, Nazi is a hard word to use with nuance.
Yeah.
so when you bring that word out, you know, I feel like they're the goat of evil. You know, and so it just conflates.
I agree with that. I agree with that. But if you look at what I actually said in that speech, there was a group of German philosophers that went back after the war and conducted a kind of moral autopsy. And they said, one of them said that the first step on the descent into hell in that case was, and I quote, the conversion of all questions of truth into questions of power. They attack the distinction between true and false. And when I see and hear over and over again the assertion of complete inaccuracies that Ukraine is responsible for starting the war with Russia.
That in itself is an inaccuracy. I don't think many people claim that Ukraine are responsible. I think a lot of people claim that NATO are responsible, or Ukraine and NATO with their agreement for Ukraine to become a NATO country, potentially, and that the breaching and infringement upon deals between the former Soviet Union and America is responsible, and the fact that the CIA have bases there, and the fact that BlackRock have deals with them to rebuild the country. Those are the kind of nuanced points that people are making. It's curious to see Al Gore analyze the Nazis. It's curious to see anyone who believes that liberal democracies, social democracies, as the solution to justice and social justice, make the point that Trump is uniquely evil. Indeed, the best you can claim is that their political movement had become so corrupted, hollowed out, facile and controlled by global corporatism that it was inevitable that in the end, nationalist, nativist, populist politicians would benefit from the space ceded by a liberal class that hated working class people, that governed entirely for elites, that favoured globalism over nationalism, and had power as far away as possible from the people impacted by the choices, decisions and movements of that power. And in a way, Al Gore, I believe, is representative of that class, of that movement, of that time. Even though I'd also have to say that when you kind of watch him, he seems sort of lucid and affable and adorably southern. The fact is that era is over now. Or is it over now? Let me know in the comments and chat. You know, Canada have just elected a globalist.
With Russia, there's so many of them, and they keep asserting these things, expecting us to believe that the climate crisis is a hoax invented by the Chinese, that windmills cause cancer, that coal is clean, and they try.
Again, a collapsing of a complex argument. I don't think there are that many people that would contest this idea. The earth is beautiful. We are stewards of the earth. We ought treat the earth not as a resource, but as our home, with love and reverence and respect. That wantonness and disregard for nature and the tendency to see the earth as a resource here for our spoils is kind of ugly and disgusting and appalling. However, like a lot of people, I've come to see that regulations around climate change appear to be particularly punitive to ordinary people without curbing the excesses of powerful organizations that might be culpable, and seem to legitimize further authoritarianism at scale. The aim and goal is always control. They're always looking for ways to put you in a 15-minute city, lock you in your house, make you take a medicine, legitimize their power. They can't come out with a pistol or a hatchet and demand it, so they tell you that they're here to protect you. Let me know what you think about that in the comments and the chat.
And they try to assert with the force of power their own special version of alternative facts.
Yeah, but I guarantee that the side of the country that voted for Trump, they hear Nazi and they just go, oh, you're calling us Nazis? First of all, it's a bit of a false premise, as bad as they are. And also, it just says to them, well, you just hate us.
I suppose the reason the subject is germane is because of Larry David's op-ed in which he said that Bill Maher himself meeting with Trump amounts to Nazi appeasement. Piers Morgan, the British journalist, went on the show there with Bill Maher. Let's see what he had to say about that.
Larry David, because you're friends, aren't you? Were you friends? Are you friends?
Yes, of course. I mean, this wasn't, my favorite moment of our friendship, but, look, I don't want to get in too much into that, but I think the minute you play the Hitler card,
that's what I think.
You've lost the argument.
Yes.
And also, I must say, come on, man. Hitler, Nazis, nobody has been harder about and more prescient, I must say, about Donald Trump than me. I don't need to be lectured on who Donald Trump is. Just the fact that I met him in person didn't change that. And the fact that I reported honestly is not a sin either. But, you know, to use the Hitler thing, first of all, I just think it's kind of insulting to 6 million dead Jews. You know, like that should kind of be in its own place in history. And, you know, I know people can say, well, we're just comparing it in this way. Well, it's an argument you kind of lost just to start it. It's just, look, maybe it's not completely logically fair, but Hitler has really kind of got to stay in his own place. He is the goat of evil, and we're just going to have to, I think, leave it like that. So, you know, did I think that was appropriate? No, but people have the right to.
Did you know he was going to do it?
Of course not. And people.
So how did you find out?
You know, my publicist said, this is going on today and you should know it. And I was like,
the reductivism and simplification of ideas of fascism, authoritarianism, tyranny and control can be applied in a variety of ways. What is more significant when it comes to American politics and American power? Is it the racial dynamics and divisions within Congress, or is it the number of millionaires and very wealthy people that likely align ideologically and economically with the powerful interests that are the first layer of influence and control outside of the remit and reach of legislators, and certainly beyond the voice of the voters? Let's have a look at Joy Reid's claim that America is being steered into Hades by white folks.
Each community on earth. If you take that away and try to distill us just down to white folks, we'll be like Europe, an aging, slowly dying former empire. The Roman Empire didn't survive because it didn't have enough strength in its diversity. It suppressed its diversity and it died. If the U.S. wants to be the Roman Empire, keep voting the way you're voting, y'all. Keep voting for people.
Let me know what you think about that argument. Here's a breakdown of ethnicity in Congress. Is it going well? I don't know. I mean, it's not the kind of thing I think about, but that's sort of understandable. I don't know, 109th Congress, more racially and ethnically diverse than the Senate, certainly. Right, so like those grey seats, that's white, is it? Okay, fair enough. I don't know, man. It's not something that I feel like I'm able to assess. Let's have a look at this. What I think is an interesting indicator of how power operates is not pigment, but wealth. Here is a list probably from Unusual Wows, you might imagine. Would it surprise you to know that more than half the members of the US Senate and House of Representatives are millionaires, and that the median worth is about $1 million? How do they make so much money? How come they enter into politics moderately affluent or not even affluent at all, but by the time they leave, they have Pelosi levels of wealth? How does this keep happening? Well, it seems that because insider trading is the way that would occur, preventing elected leaders from owning security investments, the PELOSI Act. That's a brilliant little acronym that's being introduced, but will it pass? Apparently it's being reintroduced. People are talking once more again about meaningful controls. In a way, we could all get lost calling one another Nazis and fascists and quarreling and quibbling about racial differences and divisions. As long as American politics and global politics are controlled first by money, then by power, and potentially by occultist interests that are difficult to corroborate, it's unlikely that the world will meaningfully alter for the better for ordinary people. And we're all ordinary people, ain't we?
These days, as divided as America is, it's rare for us to find anything that 75% of Americans agree on. But there is something. 3 in 4 voters agree members of Congress should not be able to trade stocks. And it does make sense. They get a heads up about pretty much everything. Unfortunately, there are 75% of all Americans, 200 plus million, who want something, and there are just a few hundred people who don't seem to agree, except they're the important few hundred, the 535 all serving in Congress. Senator Josh Hawley just introduced a bill to prevent lawmakers from trading stocks. Here's what he said about the issue last year.
If you come into Congress, my view is you should have to sell the stock and either put it into broad-based mutual funds, like most Americans invest in, or in a completely blind trust you have no control over whatsoever.
His bill is actually called the PELOSI Act because she failed to hold a vote on a similar bill last year. And to be fair, we've seen a handful of these bills over the years. They never pass. But members of Congress seen profiting off of public office is a problem. Let's actually start with the former speaker whose husband has made tens of millions of dollars trading. Yesterday, the Department of Justice filed an antitrust lawsuit against Google. She traded $3 million worth of Google stock a month ago. You decide if it's a coincidence. But it's not just her. An investigation by the trading website Unusual Whales found last year 131 members of Congress filed stock options and trading disclosures. They made more than 12,000 transactions. And in a shocker, they made nearly $800 million in the process. Back to Hawley. He's putting lawmakers sort of in a tough place, right? They have to go on the record and vote for or against something that virtually every American wants if it makes it to the floor.
What I particularly enjoyed is the fact that that bill, or bills like it, are introduced almost every administration or every term. And they never pass because ultimately people don't vote against their own interests. And it's this mentality that has to be altered in all of us. Don't you occasionally get a glimpse of a radically different world? Don't you occasionally recognize that we're occupying a kind of purgatory? We're limiting possibility just by our inability to venture into imagination, in our inability to leap into faith and even open our minds and hearts to the possibility that we could move beyond tribalism and mudslinging, hatred and individualism and materialism and commercialism. I happen to believe that Donald Trump is probably the kind of president the United States needs right now. I also believe that Joy Reid's perspectives on race are of value. I also believe that deport people on the basis of free speech is out of alignment with what most Americans believe in. Above all else now, though, I feel that the time of nations has to be reviewed. Why would we centralize populations to the tune of 300 million people? Why do we not invite the possibility of subsidiarity and beyond that even a perspective on the world that reaches beyond the limited clenched fist of I, me, mine individualism? But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think? Is it possible that we might breathe into being a better world through surrender and letting go? I pray that it is. Wherever you're watching us, X, YouTube, we're out of here. We've got a quick message from one of our partners coming up now. Click the link in the description. We're going to be analysing the corruption of Klaus Schwab. While he wants you eating bugs and owning nothing and being happy, he himself potentially was fiddling his expenses and embezzling even at the WEF. That's the allegation that's being made. We'll be looking at that in a few seconds. Click the link in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. Join us on Rumble. And if you don't have Rumble Premium yet, get Rumble Premium now. Here's a quick message from one of our partners. Could there be any clearer indication that we are living in a two-tier society when the ultra-rich resort to living in catacombs, labyrinths beneath the world, like David Bowie surrounded by trollish Henson-esque Muppets and puppets? One good thing is the changing landscape of independent media means that people like Theo Von, with a unique imagination and a brilliant comedic voice, now have conversations with Mark Zuckerberg. Who knows what PR advice has led to this conversation? But I'm glad it's happening. Pay particular attention to the fact that Theo Von is able to stay in tune with his unique comedic perspective, and that Mark Zuckerberg has to handle the idea that there's nothing wrong with having underground bunkers. It's not, of course, just ultra-rich individuals and beneficiaries of the technocratic Illuminati-like structures of the modern globalist state, but also the old-school political class also have under subterranean cities, apparently. That's something that was revealed to Tucker Carlson recently. Let's get into it. First of all, with Theo Von and his conversation with Mark Zuckerberg.
I don't even know what I would have. I would have an underground tunnel, even that it came right back up next to where it started.
I do have an underground tunnel.
Do you really?
Yeah. Yeah.
In USA?
Well, I have this ranch in Kauai. Yeah. Where there's this whole thing where people were like, there's this whole meme about how people are saying I built this like bunker underground. It's like more of underground storage type situation. But yeah, no, it's
oh wow. Zucky got that bunky. What's under the ground is just more water, right?
It's basically what you just said. It's sort of a tunnel that just goes to another building.
Yeah.
It's just a humble tunnel that goes to another part of the compound. In a way, I don't resent. Who could resent Mark Zuckerberg for being wealthy? There have always been wealthy elites. I suppose what we're interested in is the maneuvering of information, the control of information, and how that pertains to control more broadly. Mark Zuckerberg is a person that has access to the true levers of power. Do you believe that's true? Or do you feel that Mark Zuckerberg, like many other people that were there at the advent of the internet and let's call it the modern hyper-communication age, that their projects were sponsored by the CIA and CIA carve-outs? Let me know what you think about that in the comments and the chat. Whatever Mark Zuckerberg is or isn't, it's difficult, isn't it, just to look at him as another human being like you or I, another divinely endowed and blessed ape on his way to the grave even now, perhaps a little later than the rest of us due to modern technologies, incredible nutrition, and an underground bunker that's going to be of some value to him when the apocalypse is undoubtedly induced by all this needless hostility that's being stoked everywhere we go.
Yeah.
But
it's a good place to hide a little bit of dope, though. That's what I would say, dude. How big is that tunnel? Is your tunnel pretty big, or what's it like?